Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name's Michael, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, for 12 years. We have two amazing daughters, Emma, 10, and Sophia, 7. For most of our marriage, I thought we had a strong relationship, until recently. Over the past few months, Emily has been different. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She started working longer hours at her job in marketing, saying she needed to meet tight deadlines. But it wasn't just the hours. She became distant, snapping at me over the smallest things, or just completely ignoring me when I tried to talk about my day. The Emily I married loved family game nights, cuddling with the kids on the couch, or planning trips to the park. Lately, though, she seems like she's checked out. It wasn't just me who noticed. One night, Emma came to me, looking upset, and asked why Mommy doesn't want to play anymore. That hit me hard because I realized I didn't have an answer. I told her, "Mommy's busy with work, sweetie, but she loves you and Sophia very much." That night, I lay awake, wondering what was really going on. Then there was James. James is one of Emily's co-workers. She's mentioned him a few times in the past, but now his name comes up constantly, way too much for it to feel normal. At first, it was harmless. James helped me finish that report, or, James brought coffee for everyone at the office today. But then she started mentioning him in a way that made my stomach churn. James says I'm the best at organizing these presentations. Or, James thinks my ideas for the campaign were genius. Last week, she casually dropped, "James and I are working late tomorrow, so don't wait up." It was like a slap to the face. I couldn't say anything because Emma and Sophia were sitting at the table, and I didn't want to cause a scene in front of them. But the way she said it, so nonchalant, made me feel invisible. Like I didn't matter anymore. I started to notice other things, too. She'd smile when she got a text, but if I asked her what it was about, she'd just say, "Work stuff, nothing important." Her phone, which used to be left on the kitchen counter, is now glued to her hand. She even started putting it on silent and flipping it face down. I can't explain why, but my gut tells me something's not right. Am I crazy? Maybe it's all innocent, and I'm overthinking this. But something deep down feels off. I love Emily, and I want to believe she's just stressed from work, but I can't ignore the little voice in my head telling me there's more to the story. I don't know what to do next. Do I confront her? Do I wait and see if this passes? I don't want to jump to conclusions and ruin things if I'm wrong, but I also can't just sit here pretending everything is fine. If anyone has been through something like this or has advice, I'd really appreciate it. After my last post, I decided to keep my eyes open and see if there were any concrete signs to back up my suspicions. I didn't want to confront Emily without evidence, especially if it turned out I was wrong. But it didn't take long for something strange to happen. Last Friday, Emily told me she had to work late, again. Normally, I'd stay home with the kids and make it a movie night, but this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I called her office around 8:30 p.m., hoping to hear her voice and ease my mind. The receptionist answered and told me the office had closed at 6 p.m. My heart sank. I didn't call Emily right away. Instead, I texted her, "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Let me know when you're on your way home." She didn't reply until 10 p.m., saying, "Sorry, work ran late, and I didn't see my phone. On my way now." When she got home, I tried to stay calm. She kissed me on the cheek, like nothing was wrong, and went straight upstairs to shower. I wanted to ask her about the office being closed, but I froze. I didn't want to accuse her without proof, so I kept quiet. The next morning, Emily was back to being distant. She spent the whole day on her phone or typing away on her laptop. At one point, Sophia asked if we could go to the park, and Emily said she was too busy. I offered to take them myself, but Emma insisted we all go as a family. Emily finally agreed, though her heart clearly wasn't in it. She kept checking her phone, smiling at messages she wouldn't share with me. That's when I decided to check our phone bill. I'm not proud of it, but I needed answers. When I looked through the call and text logs, I saw a number she'd been texting almost every night, sometimes for hours. The same number popped up during her supposed work-late nights. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a sinking feeling it belonged to James. That night, after the girls went to bed, I confronted her. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. "Emily," I said, Who's this number you've been texting so much? Her face turned pale. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice defensive. I checked the phone bill, I admitted. This number keeps showing up, late at night, when you're at work, even on weekends. I need to know who it is. She hesitated for what felt like an eternity before saying, It's James. We've been working on a big project together, and sometimes we brainstorm over text. It's nothing serious. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, trying to keep calm. I didn't think it mattered, she said, brushing it off. It's just work, Michael. You're overreacting. But the way she avoided eye contact told me she was hiding something. Still, I didn't push further. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her. But that nagging voice in my head wouldn't go away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversation, thinking about the way she stammered when I asked her about the number. Something wasn't adding up. I decided that if I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. The next day, I woke up determined to get answers. If Emily wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I hate sneaking around, but at this point, I felt like I didn't have a choice. Emily had left her laptop on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to get ready for the day. I don't normally touch her stuff, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and found her email already logged in. I hesitated for a moment, feeling like I was crossing a line, but the memory of her late nights and secretive texts pushed me forward. The first thing I noticed was a folder labeled Work Projects. It seemed innocent enough, but when I clicked it, there were personal emails from James mixed in with office-related messages. My heart started racing as I skimmed through them. Most were casual, but one stood out, a message from James sent just 2 days ago. Last night was amazing. I can't wait until next time. Let me know when you can sneak away again. I froze. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the laptop. There it was, the proof I didn't want but couldn't ignore. This wasn't just brainstorming for work. Something was happening between them. Just as I closed the laptop, Emily came down the stairs. She glanced at me but didn't seem to notice my panic. What are you up to? She asked casually. Nothing, just checking the news, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded and grabbed her coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I couldn't focus on anything except that email. Every time Emily looked at me, I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but I needed to be smart about this. If I exploded, she might lie or try to twist things. I needed more than just an email to protect myself, and my daughters. That night, after everyone was asleep, I started gathering evidence. I took screenshots of the emails and saved them to a secure folder on my phone. Then I searched for James' number online. It didn't take long to confirm it was his. I even found a social media post of him and Emily at what looked like a dinner. This wasn't a company event, it was just the two of them. I felt like my world was falling apart. How could she do this? How could she betray me and our family? Every time I looked at Emma and Sophia, I felt like I was failing them. They deserved better than this mess. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started planning my next steps. If Emily was cheating, I needed to protect my girls. I wouldn't let her reckless choices ruin their lives. I called a lawyer the next morning. It was time to figure out what I could do to ensure Emma and Sophia stayed with me if this turned into a full-blown divorce. The lawyer was straightforward. I'd need as much evidence as possible to prove that Emily's actions were affecting our family. I didn't like spying, but I knew I had to keep digging. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting my daughters from the fallout of Emily's betrayal. I didn't know where this was going, but one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let her destroy our family without a fight. After speaking with the lawyer, I knew I couldn't wait much longer. The more I thought about that email from James, the more I realized I needed to confront Emily head-on. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not when my trust in her was shattered. But I also knew I had to approach this carefully, for my daughter's sake. That evening, after Emma and Sophia were asleep, I asked Emily to sit down and talk. She seemed annoyed at first, but when she saw the look on my face, her expression changed. "What's going on, Michael?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. I took a deep breath. "Emily, I know you've been lying to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I found some emails between you and James." Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to speak but then stopped. For a moment, I thought she might come clean, but instead, she shook her head. "You're invading my privacy now? Unbelievable." "This isn't about privacy," I said, my voice rising. "This is about our marriage, our family. You've been sneaking around, lying about where you are, and texting him constantly. And that email? Emily, I deserve the truth." She stayed silent for a long time, avoiding my gaze. Finally, she muttered, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me," I demanded, my hands trembling. "Tell me what's really going on." She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "James and I have been spending time together outside of work, but it's not serious. He's just a friend." "A friend?" I snapped. "Friends don't send emails about sneaking away and having amazing nights together. Do you really expect me to believe that?" Her face flushed, and for a second, I thought she might get angry. Instead, she looked down at her hands. "It got out of hand," she admitted quietly. "But it wasn't supposed to mean anything." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice cracking. "To me? To Emma and Sophia? How could you do this to us?" She started to cry, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "Michael, I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just lonely." "Lonely?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "I've been here, Emily. I've been trying to make this work. And while I was raising our daughters and holding everything together, you were running off with him." She didn't respond, just buried her face in her hands. Part of me wanted to keep yelling, to make her feel the pain she'd caused me, but I stopped myself. This wasn't going to fix anything. "I need some time to think," I said finally, standing up. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room. We'll figure out what happens next in the morning." As I walked away, I heard her whisper, "I'm sorry, but it didn't feel like enough." Not even close. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. Emily's apology didn't change what she'd done. And even though she admitted to some of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still holding back. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide what came next, for me, for my daughters, and for whatever was left of my marriage. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The house was quiet, except for the faint sound of cartoons coming from the living room where Emma and Sophia were already awake. I could hear them giggling, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing between their parents. That sound broke my heart. They didn't deserve this. Emily was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like everything was normal. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and puffy from crying the night before. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. She nodded and followed me into the dining room. Once we sat down, I laid it all out. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last night, and I need to know the full truth. No half answers, no excuses. If there's any chance we can fix this, I need everything on the table." She hesitated, biting her lip like she was trying to decide whether to tell me more or stick to her story. Finally, she said, "I told you everything. James and I spent time together, but it wasn't an affair. We never." "Stop," I cut her off. "I don't believe you. I've seen enough to know there's more you're not telling me. If you can't be honest with me now, then we're done." Her face crumpled, and she broke down. "Okay," she whispered. "You're right. I haven't told you everything." I felt a lump in my throat as I braced myself for what was coming. "Go on," I said, trying to keep my composure. "We kissed," she admitted, her voice trembling. "A few times. And we've met at a hotel. But it didn't go further than that, I swear." I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. "A hotel," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you even hear yourself, Emily? You lied to me, to our kids, and you want me to believe this is where it stopped." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel any sympathy. "It was a mistake," she said. "I know I screwed up, Michael. I was stupid, and I don't know why I let it get this far. But I swear it didn't mean anything." I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. "It didn't mean anything?" I said bitterly. "You threw away 12 years of marriage for something that didn't mean anything? Do you even hear yourself?" She didn't say anything, just sat there sobbing quietly. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to calm down. I couldn't let the girls hear us fighting, but I couldn't stay in the same room with her right now. I need some time to figure out what I'm going to do, I said finally. But one thing is clear, you need to stop seeing him. No texts, no calls, no emails, nothing. If you can't commit to that, then I'll call my lawyer today. She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. I'll block him. I'll delete his number. I'll do whatever it takes, Michael. Please just don't give up on us. I don't know if there's an us anymore, I said, my voice hollow. Right now, my priority is Emma and Sophia. They're the only reason I haven't packed my bags. I left the room before she could respond, heading outside to clear my head. Sitting on the porch, I thought about my daughters. They were my world, and I knew I couldn't let this situation spiral out of control. If Emily's choices were going to affect them, I'd do whatever it took to protect them, even if it meant walking away from the life we'd built. That day, I made two decisions. First, I'd keep a close eye on Emily to make sure she followed through on cutting James out of her life. And second, I'd start preparing for the worst. If this marriage couldn't be saved, I needed to be ready to fight for custody of my daughters. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I'd face it head-on, for Emma, for Sophia, and for myself. Over the next week, things were tense. Emily tried to act normal around the girls, making an extra effort to be involved. She helped them with their homework, made their favorite meals, and even suggested a family movie night. It was like she thought playing the role of the perfect mom would make me forget everything. I didn't forget. I stayed polite for Emma and Sophia's sake, but I was constantly watching her. Every time she picked up her phone or stepped out of the room, my stomach knotted. Was she really done with James? Or was this just another act? One night, after the girls went to bed, I asked her directly, "Did you block him?" She nodded. "I told you I would. I blocked his number, deleted all his messages, and I haven't contacted him since." I wanted to believe her, but trust wasn't something I could hand out freely anymore. "I hope you're telling me the truth, Emily," I said. "Because if I find out you're lying again, I'm done. No more second chances." She looked hurt, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with tears or apologies anymore. The damage was done, and it was up to her to prove she could be trusted, if that was even possible. But then, something happened that made my doubts explode. One afternoon, I was working from home when the doorbell rang. I assumed it was a package, but when I opened the door, I saw James standing there. I froze. He looked just as surprised to see me. Is Emily here?" he asked, shifting nervously. "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me so the girls wouldn't hear. He raised his hands, trying to look harmless. "Relax, man. I just wanted to talk to her." "You're not welcome here," I said firmly. "Emily told me she ended things with you. She's done, and you need to leave." His expression changed, like he wasn't expecting me to know. "Look, Michael, I don't want any trouble," he said. "I just think she deserves to hear me out." "Hear you out about what?" I snapped. "You had no business getting involved with her in the first place. You knew she was married, and you didn't care. Now you want to stand here and play the victim." He stammered something about how their connection couldn't be helped, but I was too angry to listen. "Get off my property," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "If you come near my wife or my kids again, I'll make sure you regret it." James opened his mouth to argue but must have thought better of it. He turned and walked back to his car, muttering under his breath. I stood there until he drove away, my heart pounding. When I went back inside, Emily was in the kitchen, oblivious. "Who was at the door?" she asked, glancing up from her laptop. I clenched my jaw. It was James. Her face went pale. What? What did he want? "You tell me," I said, crossing my arms. "I thought you were done with him, Emily. Why is he showing up at our house?" "I didn't tell him to come here," she said quickly. "I swear, Michael. I haven't talked to him since I blocked his number." I wanted to believe her, but the timing was too suspicious. "If he shows up again, I'll call the police," I said. "And if I find out you've been lying to me, I'll call my lawyer next." Her eyes filled with tears, but I turned and walked away. I wasn't in the mood for another round of apologies or excuses. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about keeping my daughters safe from the chaos her choices had brought into our lives. That night, I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. James' visit felt like the final crack in the fragile truce Emily and I had been trying to maintain. I didn't know how much more I could take before everything came crashing down. The tension in the house reached a boiling point after James showed up. Emily claimed she had no idea why he came, but I wasn't convinced. Every interaction with her felt forced, like she was walking on eggshells. I was doing the same. The only moments that felt real were the ones I spent with Emma and Sophia. They were my anchors in the chaos. 2 days after James' visit, I called the lawyer again. I needed to know what my options were if Emily kept dragging us into her mess. The lawyer's advice was straightforward: document everything. If custody becomes a battle, you'll need evidence to show why staying with you is in the best interest of your daughters. That night, I started keeping a journal. I wrote down every interaction with Emily that felt off, every time James came up, and anything that seemed relevant to her behavior. It felt invasive, but I couldn't risk being unprepared if things fell apart. The next morning, I was getting the girls ready for school when Emily's phone buzzed on the counter. She wasn't in the room, so I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from an unfamiliar app, one I hadn't seen her use before. I couldn't stop myself. I picked up the phone and opened the app. Sure enough, there were messages from James. My stomach churned as I read them. James, I know I messed up showing up at your house. I just needed to see you. Emily, I told you that can't happen again. You need to leave me alone. James, you don't mean that. We both know how we feel. Just say the word, and I'll wait for you. Emily, I can't talk to you anymore. Please respect my decision. I stared at the screen, torn between anger and disbelief. On one hand, it seemed like she was telling him to back off. On the other, why was she even engaging with him at all? Why hadn't she told me about these messages? Emily walked into the room while I was still holding her phone. Her face turned red when she saw it in my hand. What are you doing with my phone? She demanded. Looking at the messages James sent you, I said flatly. The ones you conveniently forgot to mention. She snatched the phone away and glared at me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to cause more problems, she said defensively. I told him to leave me alone, Michael. What more do you want from me? I want you to stop lying, I said, my voice rising. You should have told me the moment he messaged you. Instead, you're keeping secrets, again. How am I supposed to trust you? I wasn't lying, she snapped. I didn't respond after that. Look for yourself if you don't believe me. It's not about the responses, Emily, I said, trying to stay calm. It's the fact that you're still hiding things. Do you even understand how much damage you've done? How much more of this am I supposed to take? She didn't have an answer. Instead, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. That afternoon, I took the messages to my lawyer. He said they were useful but not enough on their own. You need a clear pattern of her prioritizing this relationship over her responsibilities as a parent, he said. Start paying close attention to her behavior with the girls. If she's neglecting them in any way, document it. I hated that it had come to this. Spying on my wife, building a case against her, it felt wrong. But every time I thought about what Emily had done, I reminded myself that this wasn't just about me. Emma and Sophia deserved stability, and I was going to make sure they had it. That evening, I sat down with Emily after the girls went to bed. I laid it out plainly. This is your last chance, Emily. If James contacts you again, you tell me immediately. No excuses, no secrets. If you don't, I'm done. Do you understand? She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I do, Michael. I'll do better, I promise. For a moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think we could somehow salvage what was left of our marriage. But deep down, I knew the cracks were too deep. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was the start of a battle I wasn't sure either of us was ready for. The following week, things were quiet, too quiet. Emily was trying hard to act like everything was fine, but I could see the strain in her forced smiles and overly cheerful tone around the girls. It wasn't fooling anyone, least of all Emma and Sophia. One evening after dinner, Emma pulled me aside while Sophia was watching TV. Daddy, is Mommy mad at you? She asked, her big eyes filled with worry. No, sweetheart, I said, kneeling down to her level. Why would you think that? She fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. You don't laugh together anymore. And you sleep in the guest room now. Did I do something wrong? My heart broke. I hugged her tightly, struggling to keep my emotions in check. No, Emma, you didn't do anything wrong, I said softly. Sometimes grown-ups have things to figure out, but that doesn't change how much we love you and your sister. She nodded but didn't look convinced. Will you and Mommy be okay? She whispered. I didn't know how to answer that, so I just hugged her again and said, I hope so. That night, I told Emily about the conversation. Emma's starting to notice, I said. We can't keep pretending everything's fine. She looked guilty but defensive. What do you want me to do, Michael? I'm trying to make things better. Then be honest, I said. With me, with yourself. Stop hiding, stop lying, and focus on our family for once. She didn't respond, just stared at her hands. I didn't push further. I was too tired for another argument. The next day, while Emily was out running errands, I took the opportunity to check her laptop again. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know if she was really keeping her promise. What I found shattered any hope I had left. There was a folder hidden within her email labeled Personal. Inside were more emails from James, some recent and some older. But what caught my attention was an attachment, a receipt for a hotel room from 3 weeks ago. The dates matched one of her late nights at work. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. She hadn't just lied, she was still lying. Even after everything, after all her promises, she was still sneaking around. I saved the email and the attachment to my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hit the save button. This was it. This was the proof I needed. When Emily got home later that evening, I waited until the girls were in bed before confronting her. I didn't sugarcoat it. Emily, I found the hotel receipt, I said, my voice steady but cold. You've been lying to me this whole time. Her face turned white. Michael, I can explain. Don't, I interrupted. Don't insult me by trying to explain this away. I gave you every chance to be honest, and you still chose to lie. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, but you've left me no choice. I'm done, Emily. Michael, please, she sobbed. It was a mistake. I ended it. I swear I ended it. After the hotel? I asked bitterly. Or was there another mistake I don't know about yet? She didn't answer. That silence said everything. The next morning, I called my lawyer and sent over the hotel receipt and the emails. He told me they would strengthen my case for custody, especially since I could show that Emily's actions were affecting the girls. That evening, I sat Emma and Sophia down for a serious talk. I didn't go into details. They didn't need to hear about their mother's betrayal, but I told them that things might be changing soon. No matter what happens, I love you both more than anything, I said. And I'll always be here for you. They hugged me tightly, and I fought back tears. For their sake, I had to stay strong. Emily, meanwhile, was spiraling. She spent most of her time in the bedroom, crying or trying to talk to me. I refused to engage. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with guilt or apologies anymore. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting Emma and Sophia from the fallout of Emily's choices. And I was ready to do whatever it took to give them the stability they deserved, even if it meant tearing our family apart to save it. The days that followed were a blur of tension and careful planning. Emily was desperate to talk, but I wasn't ready to listen. Every time she approached me, I felt a wall go up, a wall made of her lies, her betrayal, and the pain she had inflicted not just on me but on Emma and Sophia too. I couldn't look at her without replaying the nights she spent lying to my face or thinking about James standing at our door like he belonged there. One evening, as the girls played in their room, Emily cornered me in the kitchen. Michael, please, she said, her voice trembling. You have to give me a chance to fix this. For the girls. For us. I stared at her, exhausted. You think I haven't given you chances, Emily? I gave you every chance in the world to come clean, to do the right thing. And every single time, you chose him over me. Over your family. Tears streamed down her face, but they didn't move me. I don't care about James, she said. I swear it's over. I made a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake, I snapped, my voice low but firm. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday or burning dinner. What you did was a choice, Emily. You chose to betray me. You chose to risk everything we built for what? A fling with someone who doesn't even care about you. She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but instead she just whispered, I love you. I laughed bitterly. No, you don't. You don't destroy the people you love. And right now, the only thing I care about is making sure our daughters don't get caught in the crossfire of your choices." Her face crumpled, but I walked away before she could say anything else. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her anymore. That night, after the girls went to bed, I sat in the guest room scrolling through photos of Emma and Sophia on my phone. Their smiles, their laughter, it was all I could focus on. They didn't deserve this. They deserved a home that felt safe and loving, not a battleground. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. "I want to move forward," I said. "I can't do this anymore. I need to make sure I have full custody of the girls." He walked me through the process, explaining that the evidence I had, Emily's emails, the hotel receipt, James showing up at the house, would help my case. "You need to document everything," he reminded me. "If Emily's behavior affects the girls in any way, make a note of it. The more we can show that you're the stable parent, the better." That day, I started preparing. I talked to the school about getting updates on Emma and Sophia's progress, making sure I had a clear record of my involvement in their lives. I gathered every scrap of evidence I had, organizing it into a file that I hoped I wouldn't need but knew I would. I even started looking into therapists for the girls. If this turned into a messy custody battle, I wanted to be ready to help them through it. Meanwhile, Emily was unraveling. She started missing little things, forgetting to pack Sophia's lunch for school, snapping at Emma when she spilled her juice. The girls noticed, and it broke my heart to see them confused and hurt by her behavior. Emma, always the observant one, asked me one night, "Why is Mommy so sad all the time?" I didn't know what to say. "Sometimes grown-ups have a lot on their minds," I told her. "But it's not your fault, okay? Mommy and I love you and your sister very much." Emma nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. She was too smart, too perceptive. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't understand what. A week later, the breaking point came. Emily was supposed to pick the girls up from school, but she didn't show. I got a call from the office saying Emma and Sophia were still waiting, confused and upset. I dropped everything and rushed to get them, my anger simmering just below the surface. When we got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. "Where were you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice calm for the girls' sake. She looked up, startled. "What do you mean? You forgot to pick up Emma and Sophia." I snapped. "They were waiting at school for an hour." Her face turned pale, and she stammered, I lost track of time. "I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't good enough," I said, my voice cold. "This is exactly why I can't trust you anymore. You can't even take care of the kids." That night, after the girls were in bed, I packed a bag. I didn't want to leave them, but I needed to clear my head. I told Emily I was going to stay with a friend for a couple of days. She begged me not to go, but I didn't listen. "This isn't about us anymore, Emily," I said. "This is about the girls. And right now, they need at least one parent who isn't falling apart." As I drove away, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that I was finally taking control of the situation. Guilt that I was leaving Emma and Sophia in a house that no longer felt like home. But I knew I had to be strong, for them, if not for myself. I stayed at my friend Matt's place for 2 nights. He's one of the few people I've confided in about everything, and having someone to talk to helped me clear my head. We spent hours going over what my next steps should be, and by the time I headed home, I had a plan. When I walked through the door, Emma and Sophia rushed to hug me. "We missed you, Daddy," Sophia said, her little arms squeezing my neck. Their smiles reminded me why I couldn't afford to let emotions cloud my judgment. This wasn't about me or Emily anymore, it was about them. Emily came downstairs when she heard the commotion. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Michael, can we talk?" she asked softly. I nodded, but only because I wanted clarity, not because I thought things could be fixed. Once the girls were busy with their coloring books, we sat in the dining room. "I know I've messed up," she started, her voice shaky. "But I'm trying, Michael. I'm trying to be better." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You've said that before," I replied. "But every time, you go back to lying, sneaking around, and putting James ahead of your family." "I don't see any effort, Emily. I see damage control." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't let myself soften. "You forgot to pick up the girls from school," I continued. "That's not just a mistake, it's a failure to prioritize them. And I won't let them suffer because you're trying. They need stability, Emily." Right now, I don't see that coming from you. Her tears turned to sobs, but I was done being swayed by her emotions. I'm filing for custody, I said firmly. I don't want to shut you out of their lives, but they need to be with me. They need to be in a home where they come first. The next few days felt like walking a tightrope. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Emma and Sophia, but the weight of what was coming hung over everything. Emily was subdued, like she was walking on eggshells, but I didn't mistake her quietness for acceptance. I knew a fight was coming. One evening, after the girls were in bed, Emily came into the living room. "Michael," she started, her voice hesitant, "are you really going to do this? File for custody?" "Yes," I said simply. "I already have." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might start crying again, but instead, her expression hardened. "You think you're the better parent," she snapped. "You think taking the girls away from their mother is what's best for them?" "I don't want to take them away from you," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But they need stability, Emily. They need a parent they can count on. Right now, that's me." She shook her head, pacing the room. "You're punishing me," she accused. "This isn't about the girls. It's about what I did. You're trying to hurt me." "No," I said firmly. "I'm protecting them. And if you really care about them, you'll focus on being the kind of mom they deserve instead of blaming me." She stopped pacing and stared at me, her eyes filled with anger and hurt. "You're not perfect, Michael. Don't act like you are." "I don't have to be perfect," I replied. "I just have to be better than what they've had to deal with lately. And that's not a high bar." She flinched at that, but I didn't apologize. I stood up and walked past her to the kitchen, ending the conversation before it could escalate further. The next morning, I dropped the girls off at school and headed straight to my lawyer's office. We went over the timeline, the evidence I had, and what to expect when things went to court. "You're in a strong position," he said, "but Emily will fight back. Be prepared for her to paint you as the bad guy." I nodded. I'd already braced myself for that. This wasn't going to be easy, but nothing about this situation was. That evening, Emily surprised me. She made dinner for all of us, something she hadn't done in weeks, and tried to engage with the girls more than usual. For a moment, I thought she might be trying to turn things around. But when she caught me watching her, I saw something in her eyes: desperation. She wasn't doing this out of love for the girls, she was doing it to sway me. It didn't work. After the girls went to bed, she approached me again. "We can work this out, Michael," she said softly. "We don't have to go to court. We can figure out custody between us." I shook my head. "I can't trust you, Emily. Not with this." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then she sighed and walked away. I stayed up late that night, going over everything in my head. No matter how much she tried to convince me otherwise, I knew I was doing the right thing. For Emma, for Sophia, and for myself. The next week was a waiting game. My lawyer had filed the custody paperwork, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Emily was served. She seemed to sense it, too. Her mood swung between quiet resignation and sharp bursts of anger. One minute, she'd be doting on Emma and Sophia like she was trying to prove something. The next, she'd be slamming doors and muttering under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. Then, the papers arrived. I was in the kitchen helping Sophia with her math homework when Emily came storming in, clutching the envelope. "Really, Michael," she snapped, her voice shaking. "You had to do this? You couldn't even talk to me first." I glanced at Sophia, who looked startled, and said calmly, "Not in front of the kids, Emily." Her face flushed, and she stormed out of the room. I kissed Sophia's head and said, "Finish that problem, sweetheart. I'll be right back." Then I followed Emily into the bedroom and closed the door. "This is how you want to handle it," she hissed, waving the papers in my face. "Dragging lawyers into this? Turning it into a fight." "You left me no choice," I said, keeping my tone even. "I've tried to talk to you, Emily. I've tried to give you chances to make this right. But you've lied, you've neglected the girls, and you've put your relationship with James above your family. I'm not going to stand by and let that continue." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. I've made mistakes, but I'm their mother, Michael. You can't just take them from me." "I'm not trying to take them from you," I said firmly. "I'm trying to give them a stable home. If you want to be part of that, then you need to show me you're capable of putting them first. But right now, you haven't." Her tears turned to anger again. You think you're some perfect father, she snapped. You're so focused on punishing me that you don't even see how much this is hurting them. That's where you're wrong, I said, my voice steady. Everything I'm doing is for them. To protect them. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're not as ready to fight for them as you think. She stood there, glaring at me, and for a moment, I thought she might yell again. But instead, she just turned away, clutching the papers tightly. You're going to regret this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The rest of the evening passed in strained silence. I kept things as normal as I could for Emma and Sophia, helping them with their homework, reading bedtime stories, tucking them in with kisses on their foreheads. But every time I looked at them, I felt the weight of what was coming. The fight had started, and there was no turning back now. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying Emily's words in my head, "You're going to regret this." Maybe I would. But as long as Emma and Sophia were safe, as long as they had a chance at a happy, stable life, I could live with whatever regret came my way. The house felt heavier after Emily was served. She avoided me, staying in her room or busying herself with meaningless tasks, but the tension lingered. Emma and Sophia noticed too. They clung to me more, sensing something was wrong but too young to understand. One night, as I tucked them in, Emma asked, "Daddy, is Mommy mad at you?" Her voice was so small, so uncertain, it hurt to hear. "No, sweetie," I said softly. "Mommy and I are just figuring some things out. But I promise, no matter what happens, we both love you very much." She nodded, but her little face stayed worried. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "It'll be okay." Later, Emily confronted me again. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, her voice breaking. "No, Emily," I replied. "Your choices did that. I'm just trying to protect what's left." She didn't say anything else, just turned and left the room. I sat in silence, wondering how much longer this standoff could last and how much more strain the girls could endure. But one thing was certain, I wasn't backing down.